Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of Senate Transportation Committee. For the record, my name is Sharon Carson, and I have the pleasure of representing Senate District 14, comprising the towns of Londonderry, Hudson, and Auburn. And I have for your consideration this afternoon Senate Bill 311, relative to access to driver's license information for legitimate business purposes. This bill permits the scanning and storage of personal information from a driver's license or non-driver's license identification card for legitimate business purposes with the consent of the license holder. I'm going to conclude my testimony. There are folks here that will be able to answer questions much better than I can, and I would like to thank you all for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Senator, and as you know, I was glad to see this and so on. I just had one question. Do you think it might make sense to add something to here that says a period of time during which this may be held? I mean, is this forever, or do you think that it should say like for the duration of the purposes of that retention? Or I just wondered about that. At the it's in that last paragraph in the bold.
Okay.
Is this forever?
Thank you very much for the question. I do think that that is an issue that needs to be clarified. As we know, our licenses they're only good for so long. And so is this for the lifetime of the person holding the license, or is this going to be for only the time period that the person holds the license, the current license? So I think that's something that
I guess what I was trying to get at is that, sorry to interrupt. I think it's more that do we want to say that the business can only retain that image for so long as it is necessary for the business?
So I would agree that there probably needs to be some sort of time limit on
when somebody buys a business, and so we'll figure out some language of maybe some kind of time duration.
I think that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Peter, do I have a, Paula Minahan?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Paula Minahan, Senior Vice President, State Government Relations with the New Hampshire Hospital Association, representing all our hospitals. We are in strong support of Senate Bill 311, and we do thank Senator Carson and Waters for agreeing to sponsor this piece of legislation for our hospitals. Specifically, I'm testifying on the paragraph D, which is amending RSA 263:12, Roman 10, and provides appropriate flexibility for organizations to scan and store driver's licenses for legitimate business purposes while protecting the individual's information. Today, I will provide background on why this practice is important for hospitals. Driver's licenses and non-driver's licenses, state identification cards, aid hospitals in increasing patient safety and reducing fraudulent activities. Currently, hospitals are unable to scan and store driver's licenses and non-driver's IDs, but allowing this practice, which is a legitimate business practice through Senate Bill 311, will do three things. It'll aid in aid in deterring identity misrepresentations in which individuals use the name and insurance information of another person to fraudulently obtain medical services. 2, it will ensure that similarly named individuals or individuals with a similar name and date of birth have their correct medical information used throughout the course of their health care services. And 3, it'll prevent individuals from obtaining drugs under someone else's name. These situations are not theoretical. We talked with our hospital health information managers, and they were clear that both intentional identity theft for medical services, as and mistaken patient identity during treatment do occur, both of which could be prevented with the patient's photo identification at hand. Hospitals currently have policies and procedures in place to prevent these situations and are held to the Federal Trade Commission's red flag rules, which require hospitals to have reasonable policies and procedures in place to identify, detect, and respond to identity theft, red flags. That's what the term, that's what the federal law is, or rule. The current inability to scan and store driver's licenses and non-driver's IDs creates a barrier to adhering to these internal and external rules. And information in a patient's ID scanned and stored by hospitals would be for internal purposes only and would never be sold, rented, transferred, or made available to any other person or entity. Patients will be told that hospitals will scan and store their driver's licenses and non-driver's licenses IDs for legitimate business purposes for proper patient identification and fraud protection. Hospitals strictly follow federal and state patient privacy laws, particularly HIPAA. There have multiple rules and regs in place to ensure patient privacy and securely protect patient records. Scanned driver's licenses and non-driver IDs would be held to the same privacy and protections as the rest of the patient's record. In addition, the ID would not be part of the patient's record designated record set, meaning if the medical record was copied for continued patient care or legal purposes, the ID would not be included. We believe all hospitals should employ the opportunity to use driver's licenses and non-driver IDs to fulfill the purpose of the proper patient identification and fraud reduction. Obtaining these IDs will protect patients, prevent identity theft, and ensure business integrity for those both hospitals and insurance providers. The language in Senate Bill 311 provides the proper scope to allow this access while also protecting the privacy of individuals. The Hospital Association is in strong support of Senate Bill 11, and we ask for your support as well. Thank you, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, hello, Paul.
Hello.
And this relates to the question I was asking for
Yes.
Senator Carson. If you turn to line 29 there, in that new paragraph.
Yep.
Not to wordsmith, but I guess what I'm getting at is that something like this, and may be retained only for the duration of the legitimate business purposes with that holder. Would that cause any problems for you folks?
I do not believe it would, but I am not an expert in this area, but the health information management officers are. I could ask them, but it sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if
I
I'm
know what
just
you're saying.
getting a little squirrely over the privacy issues and so on. But if you could just check and see.
I will. I will.
The logic I'm trying to suggest is that if this is for legitimate business purposes, that it would be good to know that if that legitimate business purposes or that relationship comes to an end, that this is not, then this image is, you'd have to just get another one if the person, had years later came back or something.
Yeah,
I
know.
If they have their doctor and that relationship goes on, or the relationship with the provider in the hospital system, yeah, I mean, you keep it, but at some point, wouldn't it be
I
beyond
will
the
find.
scope?
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I will find out what. Well, they don't do it now, so I will find out what they are imagining would happen. But can you tell me again, Senator, where you would insert?
I just said something like this on line 29 after non-driver's identification card. I would go comma, and may be retained only for the duration.
Yep.
Of the legitimate business purposes with that holder. Just see. As I said, I may be being overly cautious, but
Well,
thank you.
again, this may go beyond. I represent hospitals, but this could certainly apply to others. So
yeah,
I don't
sure.
think making it, clearer is a bad idea at all. But I will find out. Yep.
Hi, Paula.
Hi, Senator.
I have a few little questions. This raises some privacy concerns for me. I like what Senator Waters is suggesting. I guess, first of all, the word scan.
Mm-hmm.
This is my driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And on the back, it has two codes. Are you talking about just scanning it, making a copy of it, or are you talking about actually scanning these codes? And I don't know what these codes are used for, so
I don't
just
either.
don't know what kind of information other than what's printed on here.
I will find out. I am imagining it's what they do to our insurance card when we go to access services.
Right,
They do that
copy
kind of
of it.
swipe so that they can verify insurance. I shouldn't assume, but and I will find out. But I think that's what they're doing to be able to access to ensure that again, identity theft is not occurring.
Okay, so and I appreciate the reason why. Could I follow? So that being said, I'm concerned if, in your case, if you're up in the North Country, you don't have a lot of options. You go to the hospital and they say, well, you have to provide a copy of your driver's license for us to care for you. What if a patient doesn't give consent? Are you saying that they can deny services if a patient doesn't give consent, which to me raises, again, my privacy concerns. If a patient doesn't want their driver's license scanned, copies retained, is that grounds for refusing to care for them or provide whatever the legitimate business purposes might be?
Mm-hmm. I do not believe they would deny services because, again, they're providing services now and unable to do this. So I will just ask, but I know what you're saying, to put something in there. Nothing in this section shall,
Right, or failure to give consent will not be grounds for denying service.
Yeah.
And one more, sorry. Final question is, can we get a definition in the bill of legitimate business services? I don't think it's defined.
I think, you know what, I'll sit down and look at the statute. I am not that familiar with this. I just know this became an issue. It has been an issue. What we tried to do last summer is actually work with the commissioner and try to get this into rules because, no, I'm sorry. The rules actually allow for the commissioner to make an exception. And so we applied, if you will, there's a process. So we wrote a letter on behalf of the hospitals asking for that, and the response back was they suggested this approach to put it in statute. I think legitimate business purpose is actually in the statute somewhere else, but this is not my expertise. So let me look that up. I think there may be a definition, but I will find out.
Okay, and one last. Yep. So if you can't find a definition and the definition is too broad, would you consider limiting this access to maybe healthcare facilities or something like that? Because I'm not sure this would, you go into your car repair place and they require a copy of your driver's license. Or you go to it just seems a little bit like a slippery slope.
Yeah, right. I thought, and again, the HIMSS folks helped us with this. Legitimate business purposes, I thought was as defined under HIPAA, but I will verify that. I think this actually came up a couple years ago when the schools wanted this as well, but I don't think anyone from safety is planning on testifying. But let me look into that.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks.
Hi, any other questions? I do have
Sure.
a couple. What do the hospitals do now, if anything?
They probably look at it, and then they can't, but they cannot scan it. they're not allowed to. So,
Can they have another sheet to write the information down versus actually scanning it?
I think this is all part of when they are admitting someone, so they are just, or they're preparing to, all the prep before a procedure, before they come in. So I think it's just part of that whole process. So it's just, I think that's more time consuming. So I guess, but I'm not really sure exactly what they're doing right now. I just know that they can't scan them because the law does not allow for them to.
So if they're going to be able to be scanned, is this information also going to be susceptible to either hackers or those who confiscate the information for ransom? Because that has happened in the past.
This is not in their medical record as they stated. So where it sits within their system, I would need to find out.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Neil Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon to you and to members of the committee. For the record, I'm Neil Kirk. I live in Ware, and I'm representing myself. I do have some amendments I'd like to propose. May they be distributed to the committee?
Yes. Just
Thank you.
hand it to Peter.
This bill represents a significant policy change for the state of New Hampshire. Currently, as you know, information from a license can be copied or taken down and written, but the license itself can't be scanned or copied. And obviously, if the bill passes and licenses can be scanned and copied, then they, of course, would be part of some database and subject, as all other information in the database would be, to hacking should that occur. There are a number of problems with the bill, and some of them have already been addressed. Senator Sherman raised the question of what a legitimate business purpose is. It's quite vague now, and unless it's defined, this might allow, for example, a business such as Lowe's to require any person who entered the store to have their license scanned so the company could create, for legitimate purposes, a mailing list of potential customers, so that everybody who entered the store, never even perhaps buying something, just looking around, would become part of Lowe's shopping information. I don't think that's a kind of thing that people in New Hampshire would appreciate, but that would be allowed under this bill should the definition of legitimate business purpose not be made clearer. There's another phrase here called authorized recipient of information. That too is not defined. Authorized by whom, for what purposes? Number 3, this bill, as was suggested by someone, I think that perhaps it was Senator Sherman, does not deal with the consequences for refusing to consent. You have a right to consent, but if the bill were to pass as it is now, and someone refused to provide that consent, there's nothing that prevents the company or the hospital or whatever the organization is from saying, if you don't consent, we won't deal with you. Kindly leave. If that's what the legislature wants, then this bill is the way to do it. But I hope that's not what you folks want. Fourth, the bill does not deal with the form for obtaining consent. So it could be buried in various other papers and never known to an individual. I know when I go into my doctor's office, I have to sign a whole series of forms, one signature, and I don't know what's in all of them unless I take them back, embarrass myself, sit down in my seat, and read them for half an hour. So the solution to that is to require that the form be on a separate piece of paper and that it state on it, if you don't give your consent, you'll still be treated just the same as you would be had you given your consent. That makes consent real. Otherwise, consent is not very real. If when I go into Lowe's now, to take an example, when I'm checking out at one of their automatic cashier machines, there's a screen that comes up and says, a separate screen, and the only thing on the screen is, we'd like your zip code, accept or decline. So you can check or use some sort of a device to check, accept or decline. Regardless of what you do, and although they don't say this on that screen, regardless of what you do, you can proceed with your checkout. Now, that to me, although I'd like it a little bit better, is the way to go. You have a choice to opt out if you want to, and if you do, there are no consequences. And it's very clear to me what I can do and not do. That's what needs to be put in this bill. The amendment that I've provided to you deals with these three things. It doesn't deal with the definition of authorized recipient, because that's beyond my ability to define. Good luck to you in defining that. But if you look at the bold lettering on Section D in the amendment, you'll see that it adds such language that you have to disclose to the individual the purposes for which this information is going to be used. Why are you asking me for this? What will you do with the information? And that it has to be done prior to obtaining my consent. Secondly, the holder who declines to provide such consent shall not be treated any differently from a holder who provides such consent, and the holder is so informed prior to obtaining consent. And finally, consent is obtained on a separate signed or a form signed or acknowledged by the holder. The holder doesn't have to sign it. It can just be a checkoff box in something else, and that will do. If these were to be adopted, you would truly have meaningful consent. If this isn't adopted, I'm concerned that this information, that people who are told they have consent really won't know what they're consenting to and won't know what the information is being used for. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd be pleased to answer any questions if the committee has them.
Senator Waters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
How you been?
Healthy, I'm glad to say.
Good, good. And still protecting privacy. I had one question, Neil. I like what you've done here. The business about not be treated any differently from the holder, one of the things the hospital is concerned about is preventing individuals from obtaining drugs under someone else's name. So I'm sure you don't say that intended if somebody comes in and refuses to have their license checked or scanned that they should still give them opioids. So I don't know. You know, I don't know if that really opens the door to it, but I think we need to check that one out.
I think that's a concern, and other businesses can raise comparable concerns, so it's a significant policy decision. Certainly, no legislation that is adopted in this area and no business practice is going to prevent 100% of that kind of fraud, to get drugs or to get services surreptitiously. What this will do, even with the amendments that I'm proposing, is to decrease that in most cases. Not perfect, and nothing we do is perfect. Excuse me, nothing you do.
Well, speak
is
for
perfect.
yourself. Okay.
What I did, of course, was perfect,
Right.
but what you folks do may be perfect.
Yeah. Thank you.
Senator Sherman.
It's clear that you trained me well, Representative, by your amendments and being in the same format. You know, in election law, we've had templates written into how we do our forms and otherwise. It sounds like you're comfortable as long as the consent is defined and has to be a part of the record, that you don't feel like we need to have a specific or a specified consent form in the statute, correct?
Bottom line, if that were the compromise, I would accept that. But in order to make it easy for everyone, if all businesses had the same form, people could really understand what's happening. So from that point of view, putting the form, as you're suggesting, in the statute helps everybody understand what their options are. So I think that's important. I know, and I think you're alluding to this, there were some issues with Health and Human Services in interpreting legislative intent, and when they created their forms through rules, it didn't quite match what had been intended. And so subsequently, in a number of cases, when Health and Human Services needed to have some forms as a result of legislation, the forms were in fact put into statute, so there could be no deviation from legislative intent.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Neil.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good to see you back.
Thank you.
Brittany, shoot. Oh, well, okay. It says you're speaking, no? Okay. All right, is there anyone here that would like to come on up?
My apologies, Madam Chair. For your record, my name is Bruce Berkey.
Yep.
With She and Finney Capital Group here in town, and we represent Equifax Corporation, one of the larger credit reporting companies in the country. And Equifax it has dealt with these many issues over the years and dealt with former Representative Kirk for many years. And in fact, I think we're over 30 years now on these issues. And have had a great working relationship with Representative Kirk, and he's had some good ideas. And in fact, I will agree with him that his observation that the term legitimate business purpose is broad in this particular legislation. And while I don't have anything specific to suggest today, what I think that the committee might consider is looking at some of the language in the requirements around the Fair Credit Reporting Act. I think that there is some good language in that, and I'd be happy to do a little bit of research on that and get that to the committee for your consideration.
That would be great, Bruce.
So,
Any questions from the committee?
and Representative Kirk did not hit me in the eye or anything like that. So
Good to know.
it was all hockey.
Wow. Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
If you could look into that and get us some information, that would be great.
I will do that.
Thank you. Is there?
Senator, could I just, under 260:14, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. These chairs are terrible. So, Paula Minahan again.
Thank you.
RSA 260:14, which is referenced in the first part, that's now law, of the statute of this. It does have legitimate business is defined, and maybe it just needs to be clarified, but it's a business which is registered in New Hampshire and which receives compensation in connection with matters of motor vehicle or driver safety or theft, motor vehicle emissions, motor vehicle market research activities, including survey research. It doesn't seem completely proper, related to what we're talking about, but there is a definition. That was, I wanted to just mention that.
Senator Waters?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, Paul, I hear what's been tossed about having a set form or so on. I certainly understand why that is appropriate in election law and elsewhere. I did wonder whether, given the variety of differences of businesses, that we could have a definition that wouldn't be vast. So what would you think about if the form, I think we're going to have a form that somebody has to sign to allow this to happen, would offer that business's definition of legitimate business purpose, so that would be clear in those circumstances, and in fact be more detailed than anything we might come up with a form. Do you think that would be doable or workable?
I think it, again, I need to run it by our hospitals,
Okay.
but anything that allows them to properly utilize the IDs to do their fraud detection and to ensure that folks are not, committing fraud, and, I think would be helpful. And I have not seen Representative, I will call him Representative, Kirk's amendment, which I hopefully can access, so I would like to review that as well, because it sounded like there were some good suggestions in there that I'd like to share with
Thank you.
my folks.
Peter, can you make sure that Polly gets a copy of that, and Bruce Berkey? Thank you. Senator Sherman.
Senator Waters brought up something I had not thought about.
Thank you.
And I think I'm wondering if we get into an ethical dilemma. Right now, if you walk into a hospital and, you can't scan the license, they get the full services. But, and then Representative Kirk and I both have talked about, well, you don't get treated any differently. And when you talked about fraud, I was thinking, well, that's probably financial mostly, and making sure that somebody's not having a billing issue or something like that. But then when Senator Waters brought up the idea of withholding opioids or other legitimate treatment, that really raised a red flag for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to underscore and make sure that we're not talking about a difference in a level of treatment or response, or that one patient becomes the no driver's license patient, the other patient becomes the driver's license patient, so they're going to be treated differently.
Yeah.
That's not the intent.
No, and as I said, I guess the other way to look at it is we're trying to prevent inappropriate access to drugs as well. So there are two ways to look at it, but these are health information managers that have requested this. These are not physicians. These are not anyone on the front line. So they are just trying to do their job and make sure that the EMR is accurate, make sure that they're billing properly, and et cetera. But if they don't have insurance card, they still get treated. They by law treat everyone that walks through the door. So I can affirmatively say that would not change. They're just trying to make sure that they're being more accurate and following the law. They have a federal law that they have to follow. So that's what they're trying to do. That's all. But we can certainly look at this amendment and get back to you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Paula.
Yeah.
One last comment, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It just occurred to me that there are some people in this state, young and old, who have neither driver's licenses nor voter identity cards. I know that may sound surprising, but that's true. And so the bill, one way or another, needs to deal with those folks. If you have an opt-out, the consent form, that's not a problem. But if you change that in some way, I hope you won't be effectively denying people the opportunity to shop or get hospital treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on Senate Bill 311 that has not had the opportunity? Seeing that, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 311. And I will immediately open the hearing on Senate Bill 349, requiring the legislature to give preference to deceased military veterans and first responders in the naming of bridges. The prime sponsor will not be here, so Senator Ward, you don't have to get up. You can. Oh, you can sit at your table.
So I'm Senator Ruth Ford for District 8, and I am introducing Senate Bill 349 for Senator Avard. This bill requires the legislature to give preference to deceased military veterans and first responders in the process of naming a bridge.
Thank you, Senator Ward. Kevin Grady, welcome. Long time no see.
Not since the beginning of the month. The State Veterans Advisory Committee. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, for the record, my name is Kevin Grady. I'm a 25-year Air Force veteran, and I'm a 23-year veteran of the town of Hooksett, New Hampshire. Today, I'm here representing the State Veterans Advisory Committee, which Senator Birdsell sits on, which is fortuitous. And for those of you that are not familiar with what we do, we are chartered by State RSA 115-A:8 to speak for the veteran community. And one of the things we do is we look at all the bills and we take positions on them, and then I come and tell you what our position is. This one's pretty straightforward. We do support this legislation. We've had a policy now for many years that if anyone wants to name a bridge or a road after a deceased veteran, we automatically support that unless someone in the group knows some kind of derogatory information or a reason why that shouldn't happen. So it's always been by exception only, and in the time that I've been doing this for the last 7 sessions, there's never been one of those times. So we do support this legislation, and to be honest, we're honored to be included with the first responders. We think that's a great thing, to be on the same level with other people that keep us safe. So subject to your questions, that's really all I wanted to tell you today.
Senator Sherman. Senator Sherman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm honored. Thank you for coming before us. I just had a quick question. We've started with caveats, naming buildings and rooms for people who are actually still alive. And with Senator Carson's help, we've developed a nice way of making sure that if they subsequently misbehave, it can be unnamed. So I'm just wondering, we have some huge military heroes. I don't mean large, I mean major military heroes who are still alive in New Hampshire. And I'm wondering, do we need to have the word deceased, or what are your thoughts on that?
I do kind of lean towards, it's a wonderful thing if we wait until they pass on to memorialize them in this way. When you think about memorializing somebody, it's typically done after they pass on. I'm certainly not opposed to it. I mean, we've named other things for people who are still living, but I kind of tend to like the idea of, like, for example, we have Ryan Pitts from New Hampshire, who is a Medal of Honor recipient from Afghanistan. We wouldn't necessarily oppose if somebody wanted to name a bridge after Ryan. We wouldn't oppose it, but if we had somebody else, say Captain Ryan Fanuff, who died in a plane crash in Afghanistan in January of 2020, if given our choice of those two people, we would probably pick Captain Fanuff since he's passed on, and we'd wait until Ryan passed on, and I hope he lives a long life before that happens. But again, sir, that's not something that we've talked about at one of our meetings. It's just kind of my opinion, and I think that's sort of the way they would lean. Yes, sir.
Senator Waters.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. So I have a couple of questions. Are you aware of there ever having been a conflict between competing recommendations for the naming of a bridge?
No, sir. In the time that I've been doing this, there's only one time that there's been an issue with the naming of a bridge, and we weren't sure whether the person was a veteran or not, and so I went to the hearing only to have one of the people on the committee ask, "Does the government own this bridge?" And we found out the government did not, in fact, own the bridge. So the whole thing sort of became OBE by that point. But no, sir, I've never seen a situation where there's two competing names. And it would be my hope, and again, this is just Kevin Grady's opinion, it would be my hope that if we're naming a bridge, the person we're going to name it after should have some kind of connection to that bridge? In other words, area-wise, you know, they grew up in that area. They went to the high school that's just across the bridge from where they live. That kind of thing.
If I may follow up, yeah, and you know, I've had Bill to honor a World War II veteran with a bridge naming, and I know I've had more than that, and some have been very historical, back to a fallen sheriff from the 19th century, and so on. But we also, and just recently, have approved namings for individuals who are not veterans, right? I mean, we do that,
Sure.
and because the town wants to do that. And usually what happens is a legislator comes forward and says, my town would like to do this. There's a bridge that I've checked out. It has no name. We can do it, and you know, brings it in. And I mean, would it be a concern that, let's say, you know, somebody goes through that process and has a bridge in their town, and somebody's not a veteran, and they bring it forward, and then somebody else comes into the hearing and says, well, no, I want to name it for this veteran. And I'm not sure we need the bill in the first place. But secondly, I would just be a little concerned if we kind of got into that situation where we're telling a community that here's this person you want to honor, but somebody else thinks it ought to be some veteran who you may or may not have heard of, or really doesn't have much relationship with the town, or something. Do you see what I'm not?
Yes, sir, I do.
I'm not trying to imagine
I do see
adverse
your
things, but you see
point
why
on that.
I'm concerned.
The only thing I can think of is maybe reworking the language insofar as practical to maybe allow for that kind of a situation where, you know, we would have a veteran that we were going to put in there, but then the town is ready to put somebody in there, and then a veteran, and you'd have to have some way of adjudicating, I would guess, which one should take priority based on that person's individual history, relation to the town, those kinds of things. So I certainly appreciate your point insofar as this legislation goes. We were just asked whether we would support it or not, and we said certainly we would.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to be asking you the
Yes,
question.
sir.
We don't have the sponsor here, but I you know, since there's never been an issue about this, and I'm just, you know, I'm not so. I just don't know whether the way we do this, whether this might create some unintended problems. That the process here, that if a legislature brings a bill in, and the town wants so and so, and then an alternative suddenly appears at the hearing, the legislature would be left with no choice. I mean, more or less no choice. So, anyways, thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? I do have one, and it's more of a, would you believe, that the language in the second paragraph that says, insofar as practical, would seem to me that gives the town or the municipality an out. Because if there is no veteran in that town, then, or a deceased first responder, that would give that municipality the availability to go ahead and name that bridge after whomever they want. I believe that gives them, would you believe?
Well, and again, it sort of gets back to Sarah Waters' point. If the town really wants this person's name on there, then, you know, we need to have some way that they can actually pull that off without having to say, well, no, this other person, especially a military person who, while deceased and while did great things, doesn't really have a connection to that particular part of the state or that particular town.
In light of this, thank you, and in light of the chair's question, I guess in terms of intent, would it be the intent of the council that that essentially a veteran is always first in line for any naming, which is what the chairman's statement implied?
I don't think that would be our intent at all. And there were people that said, including us with first responders, is a great thing. It's
well, I mean,
a
let's say
firefighter that
either of
passes
those
on,
two
or,
would always be first
you know,
in line as opposed to somebody else.
I certainly wouldn't think so. I would think that to me the crowning thing ought to be the connection to the town or the connection to to the area that is being named, more so than just the fact that this person was a veteran and they were from New Hampshire and therefore they're at the head of the class, versus someone who was in a town that died in a fire trying to pull people out of a building, and you wanted to name the bridge going into that town after that person. I would think that they would be at the head of the class for that. I think all of our veterans would agree with that too.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Senator.
Roy Schweiker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Roy Schweiger from Concord. I'm opposed to this bill, which is going to be a tough thing because I see close to a majority of senators are co-sponsors. I'm kind of interested as to why anyone would have co-sponsored this on the grounds of how often has there been a competition to name a bridge. Why do we need this at all? And I'm thinking about, some things that have been named in the past. Politicians like to have things named after themselves. Maybe with the excuse they supported a bill to do it. I know Logan Airport wound up being named for some minor Massachusetts politician who apparently never flew on a plane. So, maybe things like that are inappropriate. I tend to more agree with Senator Waters that if we want to have a guideline for naming bridges, let's name them after someone with some connection for that thing. And I'd like to present a list of names of bridges in the state that perhaps are appropriate. We have several bridges that are generic veterans, like the Vietnam Veterans Bridge and so forth. It's named after a group of veterans rather than a single veteran. Apparently that would not be, top priority under this. In Manchester, we have the Notre Dame Bridge and the Queen City Bridge, which are kind of geographic and ethnical names. And once again, identifying with the area. Once again, that doesn't seem to fit this category. We have a bridge in Londonderry that was designed by the chief bridge engineer for the state, which won an engineering award for its unique design. That was torn down in the turnpike widening. You've now got a proposal to name the replacement bridge after this guy who designed this unusual, unique bridge there. So that's someone with a connection to it. We have a situation in Concord where a high official of the state bridge design division who worked on a certain bridge died, and that was named after him. We have a case over on the coast where a bridge was named after the longest-term employee of the authority that owned the bridge. And once again, all of these people seem to have a high connection to the bridge that was named after them, but yet I'm not sure any of them were veterans, and none of them would have qualified under this. I also note that merely being a veteran or a first responder is all that's necessary. If someone served one hitch in the military as a payroll clerk, that makes them a veteran, and therefore they would qualify over the person who won engineering design award for designing that bridge. So I think that this is just inexpedient to legislate. If there's never been a problem with naming bridges, why are we deliberately picking out this amorphous group of people who are not necessarily heroes, who rescued somebody in a fire, but just was a payroll clerk in the Army, never left the United States. So, that's kind of what I need to say, I guess, is I think that I have no objection to naming bridges after military veterans or first responders or anybody else, but I think just giving this overwhelming preference is entirely unnecessary. And I just wish that one of the sponsors would explain to me why they thought it was necessary to present this bill in the first place. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on Senate Bill 349 that has not had the opportunity? With that, I will close the hearing on 349. open the hearing on Senate Bill 449. And the prime sponsor, Senator Gray.
Thank you, Senator. My name is James Gray. I am the senator from District 6, which starts up in Belknap County and goes down in Stratford County and Rochester. What brings me here today? We started out in election law wanting to find ways that we could make it easier for people to come in and prove their identity. People that are homeless, people that are just forgot to bring identification with them. And we said, well, even in the law that is in front of the U.S. Congress right now, it says thou shalt not retain or share any more than the last 4 digits. I was always taught by the lawyer, you turn that around and then it says you can keep the last 4. So working on that, I called DMV because the DMV does record certain Social Security information. And they told me that they would be fine, as long as the law was changed to provide that information to the Secretary of State's Office for Election purposes, but that they were working on a system where they were going to share information with other states for law enforcement purposes, and they needed 5 digits of the Social Security number. So that is why the bill in front of you says the 5 digits, 4 digits would be the limit on what they could share with the Secretary of State's office, but for law enforcement purposes, they would be able to retain 5. Current statutes right now says that if you are out there looking for a real ID, they will retain your whole Social Security number and they will retain your picture. That if you are getting a state ID, that you have to present your Social Security number, but that only you have a box that you can check that says don't retain it. So this bill is a compromise. I believe that the state has an interest in making sure that certain things that we do don't have a great impact on people. More and more people are getting the real IDs, so it affects fewer and fewer people. Only taking the last 4 digits to give to the election people in the Secretary of State's office, again, tries to shrink that number down. There is legislation that we are putting forward, either written or depending upon how the action on this bill goes. We'll talk more about using those 4 digits and what they can be used for in identifying voters. So I know that the Honorable Neil Kirk is behind me, a staunch advocate for privacy, and he will speak against that. But let me at least make the statement beforehand. I think there's a compelling interest for those citizens that have difficulty and others that this information will be used, will be safeguarded along with the rest of the election information, and that it is for the good of the citizens of New Hampshire as a whole to be able to use that information. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Senator Waters.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator. So some of your statements have suggested that this is for the convenience of certain folks, but the change here that I think is key is, isn't it on lines 13 to 14? Well, really lines 13 to 16. Because here it says you will no longer have the opportunity to say you don't want to provide your Social Security number. And that has been, kind of sacrosanct for a long time in licensing, that you have a right to say no. And now you're saying you no longer have that right. So am I incorrect in reading the way the this bill has been written?
What I was told, and if you follow the DMV registration process, that no matter whether you go in for a real license or a New Hampshire license, that at that time of the first license, you must provide your social security number. There is a box on there where you can check to say don't retain it, but you have to give it when you're doing that, okay?
Would you believe, Senator, that you can also have a passport or other form, and that the language here, I'll just read it. Current statute. So if they're doing that, they're breaking the law already. An applicant who is a resident of New Hampshire shall be given the opportunity to determine whether to provide the social security number. That's the existing statute, and so isn't it the case, you're saying now you no longer have that option, your only option now is whether the whole thing or just 5 digits. So isn't that correct?
I can only tell you my interpretation when I read it and what the DMV told me when I contacted them.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Gray.
Welcome.
Neil Kirk.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Neil Kirk from Ware, and again, representing myself. My former colleague said I was sitting behind him, and that was true factually, but he was also correct that I'm not behind this bill. We have a long and storied relationship, mostly very positive, actually. Senator Waters said that this was a sacrosanct principle in New Hampshire, and it has been. Let me just review very quickly what the law is now. It's true a new applicant has to provide a social security number and then can have it removed. A current license holder does not have to provide his social security number, and if the department has it for some reason, can have it removed. Or if he provided it in the past, can have it removed. That's where we are today. The bill requires the new applicant to provide the complete social security number to the department, but may decide whether the department only keeps 5 digits or the whole thing. So at the very least, the department will have 5 digits. And although I don't have a citation, I have read in the past that it is possible with 4 digits, but much more easily with 5 digits to determine the entire number. I will try to get some information about that to the committee. What this does, it adds to the list of those entities who have access to this number, the Department of State. The Secretary of State's office will have access to this, but only to 4 digits. That's a major change. Right now, the Department of State does not have access to DMV records or to Social Security numbers, but they will under this bill. A couple of issues for you to consider. Having a Social Security card is not a requirement, and while most, perhaps almost all people have it, some do not. Many young people don't get one until they get the first job, and nowadays that may be after they graduate from college. Sometimes they get it because they have to fill out an application, but there are people who go through life without it. This bill says nothing about those folks. I presume that Senator Gray does not want these folks to be denied a license, so one way or another, I think that issue needs to be addressed. There's a privacy issue here. Why is the department keeping 5 issues but only gives Secretary of State 4 issues? Why is that? I don't know. But there must be a reason for that, and the committee probably should inquire. Secondly, there's a right of informational privacy. As you know, we passed the constitutional amendment 2B. 81% of the folks voted for it, which says an individual's right to live free from governmental intrusion in private or personal information is natural, essential, and inherent. Senator Gray argues, wait, the state has a vital interest in having this information which counterbalances the constitutional provision. That's an argument, and I would suggest that it's not a valid one, but certainly it's one that one way or another will make its way to the Supreme Court should this legislation pass. But if that's the case, I think the proponents of the bill have an obligation to make that case in much stronger language, that this is absolutely essential. Now, when I was reading the bill, I assumed that the reason for making this information available to the Secretary of State was in some way for voter integrity, so that in the course of an election, or a vote, I should say, a person would not only have to present his driver's license, which is the case now, but would also, I guess, have to present his Social Security card or his Social Security number or the last 4 digits or something to identify himself. If that's the case, that's somewhat disenfranchising, because some people will not be able to do that. A number of us have lost our cards and have never really bothered to replace them, because once you know the number, you can usually fill it in. But then, of course, if that's all the requirement is, fraud is obviously possible, certainly, and the justification for requiring this information, I think, is less. I don't understand what the governmental interest would be. Also, the senator did not give a specific governmental interest, and just having it in case, I don't think meets the, certainly to me, would violate the right to privacy provision. With respect to voter integrity, we all know fake IDs are readily available. With the chairman's permission, I'll pass out an article, which I just got this morning from the website. Purchase fake Social Security card to become a full-fledged citizen of America. These are the headlines. Buy fake SSN card from our store to save you the trouble of getting a legitimate one. And there's a slew of these cards available. Just as some of us got fake IDs so we could buy beer at an earlier age when we went to college, people can buy fake Social Security cards to get a job, to get a green card, in this case, suggesting citizenship. So if, in fact, the Social Security number is so important, I think the proponents have an obligation to show that they can deal with the variety of situations, a lack of a card or a fake card, and have to demonstrate how this will affect voter registration. I guess in the case of the bill, someone needs to provide evidence that having Social Security numbers will actually do something that is so important to the state and to the safety or voting integrity of people here that it merits gathering this information despite the constitutional amendment. Evidence. I haven't seen any. Maybe others can present it, and you folks will have to weigh it. I appreciate and indeed support the sponsors' intent to improve the integrity of our elections, but I believe the possible benefits from the way this bill goes about that are far outweighed by the issues it raises and the problems it creates. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to testify and be pleased to answer any questions if the committee members have any.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Brittany Shute, Department of Safety.
Good afternoon. My name is Brittany Shue. I am the Bureau Administrator of Financial Responsibility at the Division of Motor Vehicles. We're here today to kind of talk about some of the language that we see within this proposed legislation. We did have a conversation with Representative Gray through this process. For us, when we were reading it, and based upon listening to Representative Gray, we're trying to understand if the intent is that a person must provide their Social Security number in totality or only the last 5 and do away with the ability to have the Social Security number removed from the record. Lines 9 and 15 of the legislation are unclear because it talks about the application form shall include a box to check off if the applicant does not wish to have his or her complete social security number or only the last 5. So when reading this between lines 9 and 15 and 6 and 7, it appears that the applicant will have 3 options. 1, complete social security number, 2, last 5, or 3, the ability to remove it from the division's records. When a person does come into the state in their first issuance, the social security number is written on the application, it is entered into the system. What happens from there, and kind of speak to the validity of social security cards, is the system performs a check against SSOLV. That checks against other records to identify that this social security number is unique to this person, or if there's a potential match or no match to the information that's being provided. 1, it could have been an entry error by the applicant. 1, it could be an error by the clerk themselves at the Division of Motor Vehicles. Or 3, there could be that possibility that it is a fraudulent social security number. So it is required upon the first issuance of application, but if an individual does opt to have it remove, it is removed from their record, but it must remain there for that duration while we perform those necessary checks. It was also previously spoken to about the Real ID. New Hampshire's Real ID program, an individual that has a Real ID, whether it's a driver's license or a non-driver's identification card, the social security number must remain on file. Additionally, if a person holds a commercial driver's license, the social security number is retained as well. To speak to the concerns about evidence on the validity of social security numbers. 1, there is that security to say, is there another person in the state that has a matching social security number, and checking to make sure that there's no fraud going on there. The next thing is the social security number, the last 5 that we're talking about in this instance, is New Hampshire recently implemented the state-to-state verification system, which, to clarify, when we were talking about law enforcement activity, we're talking about sharing motor vehicle records and having 1 driver, 1 pointer, 1 record across the United States. New Hampshire was the 32nd state to join into the state-to-state verification system, and through that we can match on data criteria: first name, last name, date of birth, and social security number. So those last 5 alone kind of offer that unique verification that we truly have a person moving in, for example, from Mass to New Hampshire. We've identified them, all the data points match. So outside the state verification system and how it helps individuals with this information. Let's just say there's a Stephen Smith in the state of New York, New Jersey, California, Rhode Island. As we know, it's a very popular name. So when Stephen Smith here in New Hampshire with that designated date of birth comes in, a problem driver pointer check, suspension pointer may come up. Stephen Smith would then have to prove to us that he really is not under suspension in those other jurisdictions. But if Stephen Smith's social security number is there, we are able to match those last 5 to say this is a unique match. So I mean, in the interest of customer service at the Division of Motor Vehicles, having people being able to complete their license or non-driver transactions to have that proper identification, those are some of the smaller things that having such information makes a valuable difference to the time that's spent at motor vehicles researching other jurisdictions and individuals that are subject to these potential suspension pointers throughout the country. So again, the last 5 digits are important and definitely aid in the success of the state-to-state project. The country, everyone is coming on board with this verification system. And again, it's just a data point to match on and help individuals as they move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction to make sure there's 1 driver, 1 record, 1 credential. Lastly, the effective date of this legislation, should it be passed, it poses a problem for us because we would have to make the necessary updates to our database to make sure that we can account for the last 5 or the whole social security number in total. We can now, but we want to make sure those safeguards are in place. If an individual was to select that 5-digit, we want to be able to have the ability to make sure that that information is being protected. Currently, that information is protected when a person checks that box. That information is removed from our system based upon simply checking that box within our database. Our forms would need to be updated, all the driver licensing forms and applications, to make sure that individuals are well informed of what is expected when their social security number is passed over. And then additionally, just any online content and material in addition to training our staff. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Waters.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks. I'd like to go back to the first part of your testimony, if we could. And maybe I misheard, but it seemed to me that you were saying that in the language here, that someone would still be allowed to ask for that record not to be retained. And I will just say that if you look at lines 6 and 7, or look at lines 13 and 14, where it says now you have the ability to determine whether to have his or her social security number retained, and then in both places, now that's gone. So I'm just confused why, was I correct you were saying that you could still refuse to have it retained?
Thank you for your question. I think the part that we are uncertain of is the way that lines 9 is written. So it says that the application form shall include a box to check off if the applicant does not wish to have his or her complete social security number or the last 5. So it kind of creates that question, like just the way it reads, we're uncertain, as if it's saying remove our full social security number, because it's in conflict with lines 6 and 7 that do state that all of it or the last 5.
Yeah, if I may, Madam Chair, I think you ought to relook at that, because it seems absolutely clear in this language, and then the subsequent other 2 places, that you no longer have the option to have none of it retained. Right here it says your only options are the whole thing or the 5 digits. So I think that is gone. And one more question, if I may. Given what you said about the implementation, the effective date, and I know because of a lot of other bills, the computer upgrades and all that, upgrades, but the work you have to do. Were you asked to do a fiscal note on this bill?
Do not recall that we were asked to do a fiscal note on this.
No, surprising. Thank you.
Senator Sherman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, can I ask, since we have an expert here, can I ask my scan question of her, or is that?
Well, let's finish this and
Okay,
then.
all right, thanks. So I just have a quick question on this one, which wasn't completely clear to me. For you to participate in the state-to-state verification system, are you saying that you have to be able to retain at least the last 5 of the social security number? In other words, this sort of links to Senator Waters' question. We have sort of 3 options: full social security, last 5, or nothing. But if we still allow people to not have any part of their social security number retained, are we not going to be able to participate in this program that's moving across country?
Thank you for your question. The social security number is not required. It is a helpful data match to ensure that we are pulling the proper pointers. Because if we were to pull the wrong pointer from another jurisdiction while we're matching, let's just say that pointer belongs to a commercial driver and that commercial is roadside and they run their check, that person could show as a non-credentialed driver, resulting in lost downtime.
Just quick follow-up. Now, just to be clear, though, didn't you say that commercial driver's license, you have the whole social security
You have the
number?
whole system.
But for just somebody like me, who's, I would have that option, and that would not deny the state from or make it impossible for you to participate in that check.
Correct. We currently do have records where we do not have a social security number, in which case we just don't have that matching criteria for that person.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? The one thing I would ask is, I share Senator Waters' concern. Can I have you work with Senator Gray to try and tighten up that language on whether, I know the intent is to be able to have someone to opt out, but it's not very clear. If I can have you and Senator Gray.
Senator Gray, yes.
Senator.
I agree.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Oh, I'm sorry. Nope, but we'll revert back to your question in your last,
Okay.
bill.
So, you were here for that bill, and I asked Paula what does it mean to scan? On my driver's license has that, whatever that's called on the back, the barcode or whatever. Is that able to be scanned?
Law enforcement is able to scan that barcode. If you're stopped roadside, they can scan it to obtain your license information, yes.
Does it have anything more than what's on the license itself?
No.
So it doesn't have my extensive criminal record or anything like that? Okay.
And we know you have one. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Whitney. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on Senate Bill 449 that has not had the opportunity? With that, I will close the hearing on 449. Just in time. Do you want to hear a motion?
Move exec.
Second.
Moving into exec, Senator Waters moved exec and Senator Rishardi seconded. Okay. Let's start with Senate Bill 201, relative to naming a bridge in the town of Rumney and a bridge in the town of Center Harbor. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to
On the pass. Any discussion? The motion is ought to pass by Senator Ward, seconded by Senator Rishardi. I can't answer it, but.
We have the information on the,
Pass away.
we have a trooper, or excuse me, we have a trooper.
Trooper Garrity.
But the other one is not.
Any discussion? The motion is ought to pass. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Opposed? And who would like to take this one? Do we want it on consent? Okay, Senator Gaida. We can pull it off. Consent.
Consent.
Okay, Senator Waters moves consent. Senator Sherman seconds. All those in favor of consent? say
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next one is 305. Do I hear a motion?
Motion for ought to pass?
Motion is ought to pass, seconded by Senator Sherman. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor of ought to pass, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Do we want consent? Okay. Okay, Senator Sherman moves consent. Senator Waters seconds. All those in favor of consent, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. (306), and you have, there's an amendment on 306 for the effective date for January 1st, 2023.
If you guys need extra copies, I do have those if needed.
I'm sorry? Okay. Okay, Senator Waters moves off to pass, I'll second. we need to do the amendment, don't we?
Yeah, I'll move the amendment.
Okay, and and Senator Waters moves the amendment. Senator Ward seconds. These W's. All those in favor of amendment 0254S, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Ought to pass as amended. Do we need a motion for that? Yes. Okay. Senator Sherman moves ought to pass as amended. Senator Waters seconds. All those in favor of ought to pass as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All those in favor of placing it on consent, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, who would like to take this out? Okay, Senator Ward will be taking it out. Oh, this is, Ruth, this is your bill with, okay. Senator Ward moves ought to pass. Senator Sherman seconds. Any discussion? Because we have an amendment. We have an amendment on the amendment. Huh? Oh. Okay, so amendment 0026 was basically to change the M to N, correct? Or N to M?
M to N.
That's the wrong amendment then.
Maybe.
Oh, okay, wait a minute.
26?
It's 0081S.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, because it's N, and then, what was the other change?
Yeah, I don't think I got those.
Yeah, it's 0081S.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
What's the date? Do you have copies of that? Well, how did I get
I've
this?
got 26, I guess. I've got 26.
Okay. How did I get this one?
Does that have the amended date for passage upon passage? Yeah, this is
Yeah.
the one we want then.
Yeah, the
That's at
actual
the
take
end.
effect upon passage, and then M was changed to N.
So you could move that.
Okay, so I'm going to move amendment 0081S. Peter, make sure everybody gets a copy of it. We'll see. And this amendment, for discussion, this amendment does change the effective date to upon passage, and it changes the paragraph M to N, entities giving instruction. So,
I'll second if we didn't.
okay. I moved it. Senator Waters second. All those in favor of amendment 0081S, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 307. No, we're not doing, it's 0081. Yeah,
Second.
okay. Any discussion? All those in favor of Senate Bill 30, ought to pass as amended on 307, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? think I may,
As amended, and I seconded.
okay, sorry. Okay. Oh, that's right, it's your bill. No, we haven't gotten that far. Do you want it on consent? Okay.
Second.
All those in favor of consent on?
Aye.
Aye, okay. And Senator Ward will be taking it out. That'd be great, just so they have it on record. And I already have it.
Thank you.
All right. All right, Senate Bill 309, or authorizing certain organizations to issue decal plates. This is your bill. You want to make it?
I make the motion ought to pass.
Second?
Well, no.
Yeah, okay.
Second.
Let's get to discussion.
I'll second.
Okay. So Senator Rishardi moved ought to pass. Senator Waters seconds. Discussion.
Because you weren't here and no one else was here to talk about the youth across the border.
Did you all?
No.
Did anybody get an email? Okay, probably my fault.
Oh, no, we did, I thought there was something about what the nature of the organization.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically, what it does is supportive for the Catholic youth organizations, taking them to camps. And I know that Senator Sherman, you had a question about certain religious aspects, but in the past, we've passed the Council on Knights of Columbus and the Catholic Charities, so.
So, for full disclosure, I just touched base with the ACLU and they said that it's not any traditional, so it's fine.
Okay. All right. So the motion is ought to pass. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Senator Rishardi, you want to take it out?
Yes.
You want this on consent?
Yes.
Second.
Yes. All those in favor of consent, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Do you have it? Okay, yeah, make sure they all have it, because I want everybody, I don't even think I have it.
It's the explanation, I do have it.
Oh, okay.
I just didn't have it on the other side.
Oh, yeah, I had him send it after. He didn't understand the way we work. He thought it already passed. I know, I had to explain to him the process. Okay, is that 226S? Yes, that was my next. Is that the amendment?
Yeah, I'll move Senate Bill 310.
Okay. I'll second.
And I will move amendment 0226. Once it's seconded, you got to speak to it.
I'll second.
Okay, so we know from the hearing there was a lot of anxiety about whether or not the definition here, because it had been linked solely to being mounted on a police car, would let anybody who wanted to put one of these devices on a parking lot, which might be just a public parking lot, and record their data. So the amendment I worked out here changed the definition of number plate scanning device. It says, here's what they are. And then it says, an LPR shall only be installed or mounted on a vehicle that is attended to and operated by a law enforcement officer. So that was the original intent. That's what we had in statute, basically, but just now in a different place. And then Senator Reagan's exception. And it makes it very clear now that if you're a private property owner and you have parking there, individual contract to park there, that one of these devices can be used, but it can't photograph, record, or produce images of the occupants of the motor vehicle, which is the same kind of privacy language we have in the existing statute. So I think this buttons it up. God knows what the House will decide to find out what's wrong with it, but I think
Oh,
we did our
thank you.
job. Senator Reagan said he was fine with this approach. So.
Senator Sherman.
I'm not completely comfortable with this, but I'll move it along. But I'm just, my understanding of the reason for this is if there's a situation in Dover,
Sure.
Durham, where a gentleman has a lot, wants to put in a residence hall, and wants to make sure that the people who live in the residence hall are not parking in the free lot, the commercial lot, or his adjacent marketplace. And so here's my concern. My concern is that we are opening up something that I remember when we went to the scanning state back on Culver's, people would drive through, and we were super protective of these devices going through. And this is opening it up to the private sector, but I'm not sure it's really solving the guy's issue unless he's going to walk around with a handheld device, which this doesn't allow, and start recording license plates.
Well.
And then the other question I had on this, what if this is abused? What is the penalty? I don't see one.
Well, it's a private property, so according to this, let's say it's a parking garage, a condo parking garage. The condo association can, let's say, have people register so that they can park in that garage. So they know that people aren't parking there. That would be a private organization that would need to put penalties in there. That's not us.
No, I'm saying, what is this sort of used or abused? Is there any penalty for misuse of these reasons?
That's a good question.
I'm just trying to check the statute. I don't know, did you check the
May already-
statute? The existing
No,
statute?
I
It
just,
may already be in there.
Right.
these are my two questions. One is, this really doesn't solve the guy's problem, the way it was described to me. And so we are putting in a solution that won't answer his concern or his problem. And at the same time, we are now opening up something that has been restricted to public safety use or the toll system use to the public for private use, not answering the original concern, and not providing a penalty for misuse. That's my concern. And if it's all good, it's all in there, I can vote for it, but those are my two concerns.
We're in exec, you don't have
Thanks.
to be called on.
I believe that the misuse of one of these devices is covered under existing statute 261:75B,
D or B?
Roman 10.
What does it
But
say?
that seems to me to cover potential violations.
What does it say?
Well, I can read the whole thing, but to ensure compliance with the provisions of this section or to investigate complaints of misuse of LPR devices, the Attorney General or designee of the Department of Justice, including county attorneys and law enforcement officers,
Fair enough.
acting at the request of the attorney. All right.
Okay.
And then, if I may, Madam Chair,
Yes.
address the other thing. Look, the potential developer in Durham has not built a building yet. Has not even, you know, may eventually have a separate parking lot for the folks who park there, and so on and so forth. So I don't see how we can, you know, worry about what they're gonna do when, you know, it's still just some drawing on a piece of paper. I think the issue here is that when they came in to the town attorney said that because the definition of LPR says that the definition only covers those that are mounted on a police car, then they can go do whatever they damn please. And I don't think anybody intended that or wanted that. So I think that we will let that developer do what the developer needs to do. I don't think this is unreasonable to allow this exception as very narrowly defined here. And I'm not interested in making law for some developer. I think this is a legitimate, potentially purpose that Senator Reagan brought forward in the bill, and with the tightening up of it here, the individual contracting, I think we have allowed for the use of this device, which may be more convenient in some ways to folks, condo association, or whatever it may be, in granting access to parking. So, I mean, I don't know if it satisfies everybody. I'm satisfied with this approach, and as I said, you know, we can see what the future brings, but I think this kind of covers the bases.
I also agree with Senator Waters, but I also say, since the building isn't even built yet, he needs to, if he wants something like this, then he's gonna have to work around it and make it work for him, or
Right.
them.
Well, I'm much more comfortable with it now, although we didn't get the entire reading of the penalties.
We cut him off.
I know, but I'm much more
Maybe I'm wrong,
comfortable
but
with
I
it.
think we're okay.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I don't have the amendment to this one.
0226. Do you have it, Denise?
Sorry about that.
I have it,
Would have thought you.
so I think we only need one copy.
Sorry about that, Ruth. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so where are we?
We're ought to pass as amended, right?
Okay.
Or, no, we're on the amendment. Right.
Okay, I move amendment 0226S.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of amendment 0226S, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Move on to pass as amended.
I'll second. Any additional discussion? All those in favor of ought to pass as amended on 310, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Consent?
Senator Sherman moves consent.
Second.
Senator Waters seconds. All those in favor of consent, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Senator Waters, you did the work on this, you want to?
I suppose, yeah, and Senator Reagan wants to say something about it, you can take it off consent, but less said the better, I think. When I get to the house and we'll see the,
We'll see what
explosions of
happens.
Smoke arising, I don't know. I talked to Peter Schmidt, and he liked what I was doing, so, but you never know, you never know.
Okay, just one more.
I've got the 389 ready to go too, if you want the mobile service, or do you still want to talk about, consult about that?
We just got the amendment. I want to review it. I think we're good with it, but I just want to review it. We'll
Yeah,
do it next
okay.
week.
All right, thank you.
Sorry. I'm looking at 378, relative to disposal of highway. This is Senator Perkins Coulter's bill. Okay, I talked to her earlier. She didn't want the amendment, so I'm fine with that. I guess DOT didn't want it either.
No, the amendment actually makes it more confusing, less nimble, and all the precautions and protections that I was asking for are built into it. So
Okay. So we
I'm
don't.
good with it.
All right, so we don't need the amendment.
I'll move up to pass.
I'll second.
Okay, Senator Waters moves on to pass. Senator Sherman seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I move consent.
Senator Waters moves consent. Senator Rishardi seconds. All those in favor of consent say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Hopefully that's it.
Well, I worked on this.
Oh,
I worked on the original bill,
That's fine.
so if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
I'll take
I've
it.
got two already.
Very good. Thank you. The railroad depot in Newington may yet be saved.
Let's see.
We'll see.
It's up to them. Well, it's up to the House.
You know what, David, we should let Representative Malloy know and Representative Hamblett know once it leaves the Senate. They're Newington.
I did have this.
That's all I'm gonna exec today. Did any of you want to discuss, the, 349, requiring the legislature to give preference to, that was not my intent, Senator Waters, when I was
Oh, I'm sure.
saying,
I'm all for feel good things for the, and I don't mean to demean it by saying that. I'm all for, what we do to support veterans and first responders, but I'm just, if it isn't broken, don't fix it, and
well, I think,
I don't know.
when I said insofar as practical,
Yeah.
my sense is if there's not a first responder or a, I think this probably needs a little work. I was thinking of just adding, if they have a connection to the town.
Yeah, I'm guessing, why do we really need to do it at all? I mean, there's never been a problem. We've got a lot of things for veterans and a lot of things not for veterans, and I'm not sure why it just muddies the water. I just don't see why we need to do it.
Well, I think we're practicing it as it is anyway.
My other concern on this
I'm
is,
sure it'll pass over, but we've done so many of these, and I just think it opens up a door for some things the towns could be very unhappy about.
I don't think,
We
it
just
hasn't been,
We just passed the one that said the guy who was the long-term conservationist and so on, and if somebody jumped up and said, well, no, I want it for vet, what have we done?
well, if there's not a vet that's connected to that area, a deceased vet or a deceased first responder in that area, then they shouldn't be
But,
considered.
I mean, Ray Burton might have, or Ruth Griffin, both of them might have had theirs preempted, and we wanted to do those.
Well, Ray Resort did not want that highway named in his while he was still alive. So.
But for Burton, I mean, it's a bridge up there, and for Griffin, what a celebration to do the Little Bay Bridge northbound barrel for her, and I don't think she was a vet. Burton, anyways,
Well, I'm gonna talk to Senator Avard and see if we
can I just bring up one more concern on that bill is, this is something that ultimately is decided by the legislature, but usually what happens is the town proposes somebody who's super important, or the municipality, super important to that region, to that municipality. But depending on what happens in the legislature, I just worry that it may turn into a prerequisite for these, and so I share David's concerns, and I don't know how I'd vote, but it does make me uneasy.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that my intent
No,
was not, when I said in so much practical, that just mean, I read it as if it's practical, they can do it. If it's not, then they don't need to do it. I saw it as an option, so.
I don't know what practical means. If you come forward with somebody who's not a vet, and then at the hearing somebody says, well, I didn't know that bridge didn't have a name, I want a name for so-and-so, we're stuck.
Do I hear a motion to move out of exec? Senator Sherman moves out of exec. Senator Rishardi seconds, and we are done for the day. Just in time for my meeting at 3.
Regina, here, this just came from the Farm Bureau. They just wanted a couple little wording. I mean, we had to do the permit thing, and then,
On this one,
yeah.
I want to meet.
Oh, I know you do. I just just, you know, you told me that, and that's great, but, after the hearing, Rob said, you know, we talked, and I think one of the growers